Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the House. House File 228 is a simple bill in its implementation. It removes the ability of school districts to deny requests to open and roll out based on voluntary diversity plans. In 2007, the United States Supreme Court said that schools could not consider race as a factor when determining whether or not to allow children to leave their district. And as a result, 3 districts in the state of Iowa adopted diversity plans that were based upon socioeconomic status: Des Moines, Davenport, Waterloo, and 2 districts adopted diversity plans based upon English as a language learner status: Postville and West Liberty. This bill would simply remove the district's ability to deny open enrollment based upon those plans. If we look at the numbers provided to us by the schools, we heard a lot in committee or subcommittee about, it doesn't really affect that many. We let out, I think Des Moines was 70-some% of the students. But if we look at the numbers, they are telling. In the 2018-2019 school district, the Des Moines Public School District denied 68 open enrollment requests. In the 2019-2020 school district, they denied 95 open enrollment requests. In this year alone, they denied 455 open enrollment requests. This in a year when the Des Moines Public School District was not upholding their responsibility to educate those same children by bringing them back to school. And that's what this bill is really about. It's about the families, it's about the kids. And we have to keep those kids in mind when we're talking about this bill. And now, because of some investigation by the Tax Education Foundation, we have some of those stories of those kids that were denied the ability to open and roll out of the district. For those of you unfamiliar with this, the Des Moines Public School District had some documents on their website which identified the children by name and told their stories and why they were not allowed to open and roll out of the district. I'm not going to talk to you about the names. I assume that was a mistake, and I believe that that was probably corrected. But when reading through those stories, there's one that really stuck out to me and makes me very confident that this is the right bill. Let me just tell you, it's a really simple story. A young lady was raped, and she asked to leave the school district because the perpetrator of that rape would follow her around. She just wanted to get out. Now, the way this current law works is that request is decided by the superintendent of the school district. So in this case, the superintendent of the Des Moines Public School System had to make the affirmative decision that that young girl's sense of safety, sense of security came after the supposed needs of the Des Moines Public School District. I'm sorry, I just can't even believe that had happened. But they didn't let the young lady move out. Now, we don't have more of the story why she wanted out. Perhaps she wanted out because the Des Moines Public School District she didn't feel was protecting her, was ensuring her safety. We don't know that. All we know is what we have and that they kept her in that district. And then on top of it, after the superintendent said, no, you're not leaving this district, the Des Moines School Board said, no, you're not leaving this district. Ladies and gentlemen, this young lady's story is exactly why we need this bill. Not all the reasons that people want to open enroll are the same as this one. This is just one that's pretty telling to me. School districts need to understand they are here for the students. The students are not here for the districts. This bill puts those students first. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is there discussion? The chair recognizes Representative Abdul Samad.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can breathe. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House. Winston Churchill said that Americans always do the right thing after they try everything else. One of the things that when I looked at this bill, I was happy because this was the right thing to do when we talked about the voluntary diversity. And it was thinking about the babies. It was thinking about bringing all our babies together to understand because of segregation. It was about the babies because it was about the fact that we were talking about diversity, and diversity is still an issue within our community. Representative, I don't know about all the stories. I really don't. But I do know about some stories where students were able to come together and they were able to learn about one another and they were able to share with one another. And I also saw where schools were able, with the diversity plan, the voluntary diversity plan, to be able to balance the school districts. One of the things that I do know are the numbers that in the last 3 years, there's 76% of the students who wanted to open enroll was able to do so out of Des Moines District. But I'm not here just to say the Des Moines District. I'm talking about our state. And I had so much, I was telling another representative, Representative Kaufman today, I got so excited this morning because I went to the ethics committee meeting. And I sit in the ethics committee meeting and I heard, man, with exuberation, and I heard with determination that we were about diversity, that we wanted diversity. We did not want our regions not to have diversity. And then I heard a representative talk about her children and that her children deserve to be taken care of and that the babies needed to be focused in on. And then I come here and I sit down and I pick up a bill, 228, that talks about impairing several of our minority students. Impairing students in districts like Des Moines that are 70% free and reduced lunch. The reason why this bill should not be voted on, should not pass, is because we're getting away from something that we did right. We're getting away from something that we put in place so that we could help all of the babies, not just black babies, not just Asian babies, but white babies, all our babies in school. That's why we implemented this bill. That's why we implemented the process. Just to be able to sit it down now and say that we want to take it away and local control so superintendents can look at their school and make that determination what we need to do to bring our babies together, bring our students together so that they will have that understanding. And I know we're talking about also economics. I don't play with that either. But what is the price that we can put on about educating our babies and dealing with diversity? We saw what diversity could do last June when we did the Perfect Union. We saw what diversity could do when we worked together to bring us together and do what was necessary. We saw what could happen when people are passionate about their babies and what they're doing, and we're talking about diversity. And that ain't funny to me. I don't laugh or joke about that, Tato. Just as serious as we took with the Regents this morning, I take with you tonight. Because we're talking about human beings that we are talking about taking care of from the womb to 18-year-old or older. We're talking about giving them the opportunity to succeed. This could turn sour on us if we don't handle this correctly. I'm not going to take long, but I do want to say to my colleagues in this House, I'm very proud of things that we have accomplished. I get disappointed on times that we argue, but I get disappointed when we shortchange our babies. That hurts. Amanda Gorman said, as I sat down, she said in her speech, and I hope a lot of you who watch football watch it at halftime again. She said that there's always light if we're brave enough to see it and if we're brave enough to be it. Tonight, be brave enough to be it and vote no on this bill, and let's go back and figure out better ways to do it so we can change that quote from Winston Churchill to say, yes, as Americans, we always do the right thing. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the lady from Polk, Representative Kahn first.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, those of you who know me know that I'm a communications professor, and the one bit of advice I give to my caucus always is don't stand up if you're angry. Don't stand up if you don't know exactly what you're going to say. And I'm going to break that right now. Because those of you who heard the story here about this young woman who was traumatized, some of you may know Paul Harvey. He always said, and now the rest of the story. There's a woman, a young girl, who was attacked at her school, who sought open enrollment from Des Moines Public Schools and was denied because of a state-mandated deadline that had passed. The girl was then offered a different high school to attend until she could be transferred, and she was able to open enroll the next year. She chose to stay at her school. I am so proud to represent the Des Moines Public School District. I am so proud that my children graduated from the Des Moines Public School District, and I am so sick of hearing stories about what they've done wrong. This is the state's largest school district. They do good work, and I will not let a story like that go unchallenged. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the lady from Scott, Representative Thede.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the House. You know, it's difficult to start speaking about this, but I'm going to try. Have and the have-nots. Have and the have-nots. That's what this bill does. It creates a backward system. We're going backwards. Economically, educationally, and personally. This not only affects large school districts, but it affects rural communities. We have seen over the years where small schools have consolidated for various reasons. This bill will challenge those schools going through tough times. We celebrate cultures. We bring cultures together in our workplace, here in the Capitol, in our churches. Our schools should not be any different. We should celebrate this voluntary plan and enhance what it's doing. This will be a lasting effect moving forward. Local control is extremely important to a district. Davenport Schools is one such school. Des Moines is one such school. If there are issues, rather than throw this away, sit down and figure out how we can make better changes. But the legislature should not be taking on a voluntary diversity plan and getting rid of it. I'm frustrated because this seems to be the pattern that the legislature is going. Take it away, take it away, take it away. And again, I'm going to repeat the same phrase I started with. This creates the have and the have-nots. will leave schools, public schools, less than. Other schools will be successful. And not every child will get to go to another school. You know why? Because these schools will decide, I don't want you here. Now, believe me when I tell you this, because I've seen it happen. This will happen. Retreating back to the past, we left it because it didn't do us well. We left it because Iowa has a history of moving forward. But I'm sad to say, tonight, we're going backwards because the majority party wants to see this go backwards. I'm sorry to say that, but I think that's what I know that's what I feel. At the end of the day, and I'm going to repeat this again, you're creating the have and the have-nots. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Polk, Representative Hunter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Converse, I was going to start this by apologizing to you because I too was going to come in angry and still am. I wasn't really going to say anything today, but the half-truths and downright untruths that just came out of the opening statement today has forced me to do so. Representative Height, I believe you probably knew why that poor lady was turned down on her open enrollment request. But it didn't add much to your story. And to suggest that the Des Moines Superintendent Ayers, the Des Moines School Board, and the Des Moines School District does not have the best interest of their students in mind is a downright lie. I just wish the Republican majority in this body cared for their students as much as the Des Moines School District does. Perhaps then we'd get something done. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, it was 1954, about over 66 years ago, that the Supreme Court ruled on Brown versus the Board of Education. In that ruling, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that separating black and white students was inherently a bad idea. And the concept of separate but equal lost all footing with that ruling. In the years since then, there's been more and more research done that suggests that integrating social economic classes together not only helps those at the lower end, but helps everybody. Those in middle and higher class situations by integrating with those at a lower socioeconomic situation actually learn more that way. They learn that they have to deal with people of different upbringings, of different knowledge bases, of different experiences. And that way they develop a more inherent sense of learning. So through the years, especially through the 70s, I think, we did this integration. And I will admit, I'll be the first one to admit, that it wasn't done very well. And a lot of parents protested. And we came down to the 2007 Supreme Court ruling that said that voluntary diversity plans that just used racial criteria was not acceptable. That it had to be based on other factors such as income and social economic circumstances. That is what the 5 school districts have done. And because of that, they have found that the learning experience, because they do care about their children, Representative Height, is a more richer experience. That research, and there's been some research that's actually documented this, that students' exposure to other students who are different than themselves and the novel idea and challenges that exposure brings leads to improved cognitive skills, including critical thinking and problem solving. That's what we're trying to get rid of today. Because there's some parents that don't like to follow the rules. Let me tell you the reasons that people were denied the open enrollment out. There were basically, the overwhelming reason was that they didn't meet the state mandated deadline on when to file. The other reason was that it didn't match the open in and open out criteria as set by the schools in some instances. But even with that, 76%, over 76% of all applicants were approved in Des Moines. That is showing that we care about our students. The fiscal impact, if this bill should get passed, especially with the regard that the majority party holds our children.
State your point.
Mr. Speaker, this is the third time I have heard Representative Hunter question the motives of not just the floor manager, but the entire Republican caucus on the floor of the Iowa House.
No, I haven't.
Representative Hunter.
Yes.
Representative Kaufman, your point is well taken. Representative Hunter, please stick to the topic at hand.
No, the topic at hand is that our children. And if this bill gets passed, there will be a negative effect on the children of those districts, whether you like it or not. In Des Moines, that hit's going to be about $1.5 million. In a school year that we've seen COVID, in a school year that you've demanded that the Des Moines School District unsafely open up its 100% in-person learning, even though the CARES money doesn't cover the extra rooms or the extra personnel or that type of thing to make that safely work. You've cut them by $1.5 million in a year.
State your point.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The representative's comments are not in keeping with what the question before the body is.
Well, actually,
Representative Hunter and Representative Winchell, we approach you well.
are you going to put on a mask?
We'll be able to maintain 6 feet of social distance.
You put on a mask, I'll come down.
All right, Representative Winchell, your point is well taken. Same point as stated before, Representative Hunter. Please stick to the matter at hand.
The matter in hand is that you're screwing our kids. And you might not want to talk about it. You might want a point of order anytime somebody says something that doesn't go with, might hurt your feelings a little bit. But House File 228 will hurt our kids. It will hurt the educational programs in those 5 districts that you're talking about. And it will cause financial and educational damage to the kids that supposedly we're trying to help in this bill. This bill is bad. The idea is bad. The system works. Vote no on House File 228. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the lady from Johnson, Representative Masher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, many of you who have been here for a while know that I am a proud retired public school teacher. I taught in the Iowa City schools for 33 years. So education is near and dear to my heart, and I have a great deal of experience, which is why I've served on the Education Committee in the House for the last 27 years. And during that time, every year, we have talked about closing the achievement gap. And some of you may automatically go to, well, that has to do with racial issues. It really has to do with poverty. And the fact that we have been trying to identify what we as a state need to do to address poverty. Those kids and families live in all of our districts. We know who they are. They struggle to make ends meet. They struggle to put food on the table. They struggle to make their rents. They struggle every single day. And so the Education Department, and I want to thank the Department of Ed in Iowa, because every year they put out a report, and I would challenge all of you to read it. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time reading it to you tonight, but I do want to give you the summary so you can get at least some idea of what they are trying to accomplish. This particular report is called Closing the Achievement Gap, and it's specific to Iowa and what is happening to our demographics here. It's interesting that one of the first things they cite is the fact that our poverty levels are increasing in Iowa. Over 42% of our children in our K-12 system qualify for free and reduced lunch. That should tell us something. We are not keeping pace with incomes. We haven't raised the minimum wage, and we haven't done what we need to support those families. And as a result, many of those kids are failing. Not because they don't care. They're oftentimes, and I can vouch for this, they never miss a day of school. And it's often because they know they're going to get a lunch that day. They know there's security there and there's safety in those school settings. So when we look at this voluntary diversity plan, no district is forced to do this. I emphasize the voluntary. Those districts that have chosen to do it have done so because they have a great deal of poverty, and they need to address that. And this is one of the ways they've gone about it. They're trying to create equity for all children in Iowa. So I want to just share just a few of the comments in terms of the conclusions and summary in the report. This report includes 2 decades of enrollment information about Iowa students, and over this time period, a significant shift can be found in the demographics of students who attend Iowa public schools. Iowa schools are more diverse now than at any other time in our history. Slightly more than 1 in 4 students is now a student of color. In addition, long-term trends show significant increases in the percent of Iowa students from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. At the same time, year-to-year trends show a slight decrease in some of the free and reduced lunches in your areas, but again, 42% of our kids qualify for that. Year-to-year trends show a flattened trend in the line of percentage of English language learners, and enrollment projections suggest that trends continue and the school population will continue to become more diverse over time. So what were the recommendations? So I kind of chuckle because what we're doing tonight flies in the face of the recommendations. And we ought to be honest about that and admit what we're doing, because it's totally opposite of what we need to be doing to address the poverty in Iowa. So what has the state been doing and what are districts trying to accomplish? Our diversity plans are one of those. There was a significant activity across the state to roll out and begin to implement improvement plans to increase student achievement and decrease achievement gaps. For example, the department and AEA partners held over 100 regional training sessions. There was a week-long summer institute which had over 600 registrants. Furthermore, over 300 school improvement plans, that includes diversity plans, covering a wide range of important areas such as leadership, infrastructure, and intervention systems. These plans were designed to address a school's area of need. Plans included measurable goals, timelines, resources needed, and evidence of implementation. These plans are being implemented during the 2019-20 school year, and future versions of this report will analyze improvement efforts and their impact on closing the statewide achievement gap between students. So I'm telling you tonight that our 5 districts that have implemented these plans did so for their kids. They did so that they could see a change in those achievement results, because we have been not making the trends and the accomplishments that we need to with those kids, and it's mostly based on poverty. So it's poverty in rural Iowa, it's poverty in our inner cities, and it's poverty throughout the state, where kids are having a hard time in families where their basic needs are not being met. So I applaud Des Moines, Postville, Waterloo, West Liberty, and Davenport for implementing these diversity plans. And I apologize to them for taking an action that this legislative body knows is the wrong direction. Mr. Speaker, I'll be a no vote on this bill. Thank you.
Chair, I recognize the lady from Scott, Representative Winkler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I rise in opposition of House File 228. I want to talk a little bit about why the diversity plan is so very important. First of all, we need to look at student achievement and the opportunities that a rich, diverse community provides. In Iowa, we seem to be long on choice, but short on resources. And I want you to be aware of all of the choice that we give parents and students in Iowa. They can attend school in certainly their resident district. They can open enroll within the district. There is online and virtual program within the district. There's non-public schools within the district, and there's non-public schools in another district. There's homeschool assistance. There's independent home instruction, open enrollment between districts, and open enrollment to a virtual academy. Long on choice, short on resources. We should be enhancing the equity in Iowa, not restricting it. Gutting local diversity plans is a serious blow to that goal and to the principle of assuring that every child deserves a quality educational opportunity no matter their zip code. I think the governor said that in her speech a couple weeks ago. No matter their zip code. Yet this bill turns that on its head. We're headed the wrong direction. The Iowa Association of School Boards and the Urban Education Network have noted that the plans are focused on the socioeconomic status, and we heard this from Representative Height, as well as English language status. The research, science, the research is clear that maintaining a balance in a classroom of students of all socioeconomic statuses has a positive impact on a student's achievement. Elimination of the ability to review and accept or deny an open enrollment request will negatively impact that ability of these districts to minimize a concentration of low-income or English language learner students. Representative Hunter talked about the fiscal impact to Des Moines. Davenport, who some of you who have been here for a while understand that they've had some fiscal issues, they'll lose $783,000 as a result of the implementation of this plan. That's a whole lot of opportunity for students. Our superintendent had a letter, kind of an all-call out to the public. Each year, Davenport Community School District offers voluntary transfers within our district. This ensures that students have a choice in which schools they wish to attend. However, analysis of open enrollment out requests show that they are slanted towards students from families with high socioeconomic status. If our ability to balance open enrollment requests is removed, we will become less diverse with adverse socioeconomic percentages. We are continually striving to improve the economic status of our school district and the community. We are proud of the efforts of our schools to place students on strong, reliable career paths. In such fields as manufacturing, engineering, computer science, healthcare, and more. The stability that we are working so hard to build within our district may be disrupted should the pending legislation pass. There are 79 districts across the state that have over 50% free and reduced lunch numbers. 79. And that's going up. Socioeconomic status has an impact on the cost of educating students. By eliminating the diversity plan, we eliminate the options and opportunities that students have. Please vote no on this bill and allow our students to maintain opportunity and the rich experience of diversity. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Story, Representative Wilburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I rise in opposition to this bill, maybe not a surprise to some of you. Before I moved to my current community that I call home, Ames, I did live in Iowa City, and I was working for the Iowa City Community School District. My title was Equity Director, but basically that's a diversity officer. And my responsibilities, part of them were investigating claims of sexual harassment, bullying, and discrimination of federal and state laws. So I did a lot of educational supports, and I had the honor of working with Representative Masher and teachers that, Representative Winkler and Smith and others in the body, to make sure that those supports were provided to students that have challenges, whether that be based on race or specifically what we're talking about here, economic challenges. Representative Height mentioned the Supreme Court case, but I want to emphasize the net result of that case was that other factors, such as income, were validated. You can do them. And they are done all the time when teachers and schools have the resources working with parents to do such supports. Representative Masher did a great job, and Winkler did a great job pointing out some of those challenges about why they are used, those supports and those plans, voluntary plans. Thanks for reminding me, Representative Masher. Those focused funds that go to address students that have their families have economic challenge, studies have shown that high concentrations of low-income, economically challenged families create further challenges for student achievement. And with funding, and if not overwhelmed, they have the opportunity, the teachers, the aides, the parents, to make sure that those supports are given to try and lift and raise achievement. It's hard to learn if you're hungry. It's hard to learn if you have a mental or physical disability. It's hard to learn if you're being bullied, and all of those supports. And they're magnified when districts don't have the opportunity to try and balance those challenges and offer the supports. Another support is transportation, that when someone open enrolls, families don't have, they have to provide their own transportation, and districts do what they can to try and juggle, but a family that is economically challenged won't have that as an option. I want to come back to the story that Representative Height shared. And Representative Conference, I want to thank you for sharing the rest of that story, because that was a very powerful and unfortunate, tragic incident that happened to that young woman. I want to know if Representative Height would yield to 2 questions.
Will the gentleman yield?
Be happy to.
You're in order.
Okay, thank you, Representative Height. Again, a very powerful story, and it's important to know these stories. My question is, were you aware of the rest of the story that Representative Converse mentioned, that it did occur, the request after the deadline, the state-imposed deadline, and the very next school year, my presumption is that supports were offered to that student. The next school year, she chose to return to her school. Were you aware of that?
You see, Representative, I don't have the kid's name.
Okay.
I have no idea how to know what happened afterwards, because that's private. I don't have that information.
Okay. I was not trying to insult you, Representative. If it came across that way, I apologize. I was asking the question, were you aware? So you were not aware. So thank you for that information. The other piece, the supports that I mentioned and tools that are provided. Part of my job I mentioned was investigating sexual harassment. That's under Title IX. And are you aware, and I don't know in your position, are you aware of other supports and mandates that are required because of Title IX?
With Title IX?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't think that's what we're discussing. No, I'm not an expert on Title IX.
Okay, that's good. And that's all the questions I have. Thank you for yielding, Representative. The reason I mentioned Title IX is an anti-discrimination based on gender, based on sex, and sexual assault is the ultimate form of sex discrimination. And under that statute, folks, school districts are required to respond. They have to respond and investigate and provide supports to a student, any student, regardless of their sex, if they feel that they've been sexually assaulted, sexually harassed. And part of those supports, in addition to social emotional counseling, is that student can, to ensure the safety of that. So there are times when, in my position, back in the day, that a student may have been, the student who committed the offense would have had to have been separated and moved to another location. I don't know, again, because of privacy, Representative Hyde, there's no way I would know, and I'm not going to ask Representative Converse to share that information. But as you take this vote, I want you to consider voluntary. I want you to consider that it is allowed by that Supreme Court decision that socioeconomic status can be a factor in these voluntary plans. And again, it's not something that a district has to do, but I'm just asking you, don't take away another tool that a school district has. If we're not going to provide the funding, let's make sure that they at least have the tools. And I ask you to vote no. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes the lady from Marshall, Representative Cahill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the House. I oppose this bill. These districts have voluntarily taken on the diversity plans to help all students. Our Iowa public schools have always been the great equalizer for all children. Everyone is welcome, and the learning is free, and they even throw in lunch and breakfast. I'm from Marshalltown, and I also have a story to tell today. In Marshalltown, we do have more than 60% of our students who qualify for the federally funded free and reduced lunch program. We have a number of students who open enroll out, and although they say it might be, families might say it's for smaller class sizes or for a more rural experience like they had, there's a number of reasons why they open and roll out, and it's usually pretty evident. But my story today is a story of Joe. Joe came from a middle-class family, and he came to one of the schools, the elementary schools in Marshalltown, with a high number of students qualifying for free and reduced lunch. It was a school with a high level of diversity. His friends were Jose and Carlos. Jose and Carlos often came to Joe's house, and Joe often stayed at their homes. He learned Spanish from his friends and classmates, and they learned from him as well. Joe did fine in school. His family saw that his learning continued to increase, but they commented that his greatest learning was on a horizontal scope. He learned skills such as different cultures. He learned to expand his critical thinking. His cognitive abilities increased as he learned how to get along with people that were not exactly like him, how to learn from people who might be different. But Joe didn't really see them as different. They were just his classmates, just the kids at school. You see, Joe is my youngest son. Now Joe is a young adult, and he often comes back. He is a college graduate. He's working in the advertising social media field. He says he learned more in his years at Woodbury School working with students of great diversity than he ever learned in all of his college classes. He said that experience prepared him to be able to adjust to the world he was going to work in and the world where he survives today. I believe that not everyone has the best intentions if they want an open enrollment. They're thinking of their child, but again, we need to think of all kids. If we want it better for one child, we have to make it better for all kids. I oppose this bill, and I encourage you to give our children the opportunities to learn from each other so that we can have a more productive and a more cohesive citizenship as they advance into their adult years. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Seeing no further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Height for closing remarks on House File 22-8.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good evening, Mr. Speaker. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the House. Representative Kahn first. I think we need to probably get a few things straight first. I never made a mention of a student's name because I don't have one. So I'm not even sure you and I are talking about the same incident. Lord, I hope there's only one of them, but I don't even know if we're talking about the same incident. But let's assume, for argument's sake, that we are. I come back to my point with Representative Wilburn. I have names blacked out. That's all that is given to me, and that's, quite frankly, I shouldn't have the kids' names. I don't know how we know what happened after, but let's assume that's what happened. And let's assume that the student was late in applying. You see, there's exceptions to that rule. One of those exceptions is pervasive harassment. Surely having the person who sexually assaulted you follow you around school qualifies as pervasive harassment. And so if that's the case, then what reason could be given to deny that request? But, you know, we do need to know more of the stories. Because Representative Abdul Samad, you're right, this is about the kids. This is about the kids. So let's talk about the other stories. Again, all I have are stories that were taken from the Des Moines Public School website. The reason why I'm talking about them is because that's the only documents I have. I think that these were not even intended to be public, but somehow they became that way. I don't have them from other school districts. I can't pretend to know what has or what has not occurred in those. What I have is in front of me. We have a student who was subject to harassment and wanted out. We have a student who was threatened and wanted out. We have a child who was assaulted and charges were filed against the perpetrator and wanted out. We have another child who was being assaulted, and the district said, and this is in the notes, that kids stabbing each other with a pencil and pulling each other's hair were typical for middle school. My wife's a middle school teacher, has been for 15 plus years. I don't think that's typical in her day. There was a child who was assaulted at school, and in the notes we have that there was a safety plan, and that would have been sufficient. We have a child who was bullied. We have another child who was assaulted and missed several days of school. We have another student who was bullied, another student who said they were jumped twice, another student whose therapist was asking that the child be allowed to leave, a student who received the threat of being beat up in the bathroom, a child who says he was bullied through the 4th and 5th grade, a student who was cutting themselves due to the anxiety of being in a large school. Some of us come from pretty small schools, and that's where we learn best. A student whose doctor recommended online learning due to a concussion. We have online schools in the state of Iowa. And a student who just wanted a smaller school. Now, all I have is the notes in front of me. I don't have the veracity of these stories. And I would tend to believe that most of them are true. I would tend to believe that all of them are true. But you see, it doesn't matter. What matters is students' parents have made the decision that they want out of these districts. That's not the best place for their student. Whether it's these reasons or other reasons, this bill gets rid of the mechanism which schools use to deny those requests. Deny those requests without necessarily even looking at what actually happened, what actually the student is saying. That's what this bill is for. It's for the students, it's for the kids, it's for the parents. It's for the students that are asking to leave, the 455 that were denied this year from the Des Moines Public School. We talk about the budget and the sorry, I don't have all figures in my head. The $1.4 million that this supposedly would cost the Des Moines Public School District. The Des Moines Public School District has a budget of almost $800 million. $1.4 million is a lot to my school. It's a small amount to Des Moines. But more importantly, that money, the reason they're going to lose it is because parents get to decide where their kid goes to school. Parents get to decide what is best for their student. We heard that these are voluntary diversity plans. They're voluntary. Do you know who it's not voluntary for? The students in those schools, the parents of those students. It's voluntary because the school district adopted it, but not the parents and not the students. I think this bill is an important bill for the state of Iowa. It's important because we are listening to those parents who say, I want other options in education. This bill gives them that. This bill says that the students' well-being will be the most important thing in the state of Iowa. Mr. Speaker, I move House File 228 and ask that it be read for the last time and placed on its passage.
The gentleman from Mahaska moves the bill be read for the last time and placed on its passage. Are there objections? Seeing none, clerk will read.
House File 228, a bill for an act relating to voluntary diversity plans in the state's open enrollment law being enacted by a General Assembly of the State of Iowa.
Question now is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor of its passage shall vote aye. All those opposed vote no. The clerk will open the machine. Receive your vote. Moore of Scott votes aye. Judge votes no. Stade votes no. Bennett votes no. Hall votes no. Running Marquardt votes no. James votes no. Jones votes aye. Have you all now voted? Clerk will close the machine. The House pay attention to the results of the vote. Those voting aye, 56. Those voting no, 31. Absent or not voting, 13.